Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Grimm, Season 1, Episode 5 and 6. Let me know in the comments below if you've had this kind of person in your life, because I know there probably is. So, we have a music director in this episode, in Episode 5, that is to go on and tell you, like, well, hey, like, we are going to be here all night to get it perfect, and I'm going to stay here as long as we need to, yada, yada, yada. And immediately this pinged in my brain because I was at music in school. I was in band, and we had this one instructor that was to go on and tell us, "Excuse me, like the bell does not dismiss you. I dismiss you." And in my brain, I was like, "Great, let's be here all day long. Let's interrupt all the other classes that are going to come in here next. I don't really care about them. Let's stay here as long as we can." Because I had nothing better to do. Because I didn't want to like haul myself from one side of the school to the other. Because my next class was that kind of thing, where it was like me having to go through like the whole side of school to get to my next class. So yeah, like let's stay here all day long. I don't. I want to miss all my other classes. This sounds like fun. So, uh, like when people go on and have that kind of attitude, you really just want to mirror it back. But then you also go on and happens after that. Like jobs happen where you have certain things where like people go on and tell you like, yeah, I know, like we have to leave at a specific time tonight, but we got to make sure that this store is cleaned, so we're gonna have to stay here as long as possible to get the store cleaned. And I would be thinking in my brain, I'm like, well, like I'm already scheduled till 10, and I have to turn around and I have to come back here at 5 in the morning to do another 8-hour shift. I'm already like we're already dancing around, not exactly getting really 8 hours of sleep. How long are you gonna have me stay here even longer so I can get even less sleep? But it would just get to the point where I just wouldn't sleep for a number of days for those kinds of jobs, anyways. Um, Hoping that I can uh, just stay coherent enough through those kinds of things, and then at some point probably realize how uh, much I was just not happy with those kind of jobs and decided to leave them um, when the appropriate time was in place. So that's what happens. So moaning and groaning, right? Pushing on. So we debut a character in episode 5, or episode 5 and 6, called Bud. But of course, to be this repairman that uh, goes on to become a regular on the show, he ends up getting used as a comic relief character. There, of course, is a plethora of time where he is to be this scared character, but at some point changes to be a guy who has to kind of stand up for what he believes in at certain points. Uh, but a lot of times he's just this scared guy that you can't really trust. So, but at some point also, Bud does become like the voice of the Vesson community, where Bud is to tell the Vessons that Nick is all right. He's a great guy, and then Bud is to run to Nick to say like, hey, something's going horribly awry within the Vesson community. This is going on. Nick, you need to come up with a way to solve this, so that way you can kind of um, kind of uh, kind of shake hands and kiss babies kind of opportunity to politic your way into winning over some Vessens in for future events. Because now people know who Nick is, and they realize they can come to him instead of being afraid of him. So, anyways, Bud in these episodes, I can kind of say what happened to him because there isn't any part of Bud that ends up getting tied to the real meat and potatoes of either one of these stories in this episode. Plus, I don't remember where he's actually used. So, Bud ends up coming into fray because we have Juliet, who is desperately wanting to make smoothies. Come to find out, when Nick is to look in the refrigerator, it seems that they were all out of ice, and so they have to figure out a way for their refrigerator to make more ice. So they bring Bud in to fix this problem. Bud then goes on and is to realize while he's fixing this refrigerator that the refrigerator's take a bite out of him. When Bud is to turn to show his boo-boo, his owie, he thinks that he's going to be talking to Juliet, and instead he's talking to Nick. Bud ends up voguing, and we of course end up having Nick realize that this is a Beaver Vesson, and that he is a Ice Bibber, or Ice Biber, however that's pronounced. Ice Bieber, Ice Bibber, however that's pronounced. You can make fun of me all you like. These words aren't easy to pronounce. And at some point later on down the road, when they pronounce it like, oh, that's how I should have said it, great. Thumbs up. Owie! Moving on. So, Bud then is to run away from Nick, realizing he's a Grimm. Bud then runs back to see that Juliet is the only one home. So Bud is to quickly grab his tools, apologize for him running off like that, but he ended up getting scared of Nick, and so they kind of have to like rationalize like why this guy ran off to Juliet and so on and so forth. Yada yada yada. Maybe in the story, I think they say that Bud had ran into Nick while he was to be a cop at some point. They try to do that up in the story. We also have Adeline, who is to be tied with Hank, possibly in a romantic way, to have Adeline be at this bar that Hank is already at because he had went on to share some drinks with Wu. Having Wu talk to Hank about his previous relationship and how Nick should have been Hank's partner during that time to have made Hank think twice about being with the woman he was with, and giving Hank some backstory here, but also giving Wu some lines, which is great, to try to continue to use this character more often. It's great. I like Wu anyways. Wu ends up delivering like great comedy later on. If he already isn't giving us really fun comedy, like the airbag joke that he ends up using in the pilot, I thought was kind of funny. But so, we have Adeline, who ends up trying to say to Hank, it's like, well, hey, some people that I was supposed to be dining with didn't come, so hey, would you do me the honor of just kind of sitting with me, and so on and so forth. Hank agrees, but we also have the captain who's watching on as both Adeline and Hank are to be drinking it up. But it's just kind of setting up that relationship, where at some point Adeline is going to use magic to get even closer to Hank at certain points. But moving on. So, now for the actual episode story, we kind of have a siren or a Pied Piper kind of episode here. With episode 5, we have a scenario where a DJ is to not only be fairly popular, DJ Wretched Cat is to be making popularity within these clubs. And come to find out, this guy, while he's off on his own, is to play this violin and is to be amazing at it. Because of course, these Vesson have, I guess, this musical ability of sorts, and somehow we have uh, this Vesson that ends up channeling these rats to control them, and so we naturally assume that this Vesson is probably to have gone on and killed this previous musical director, but we'll go on to find out how that story is to play out within episode 5. In episode, in episode 6, we go on and give Monroe some backstory with not only his character, but his Vesson also. That it seems that Blutbots have had a problem with Bauerschwein for a very long stretch of time. A huge history between the whole huff and puff and blow themselves down kind of thing. The Three Little Pigs and the Big Bad Wolf, like that whole connecting thing, ends up being the problems between both wolf and pig. So we end up getting a pig Vesson within this episode, which I remember end up seeing this episode, and I immediately knew who the villain was going to be in this episode. And I was like, you know what? They probably could have written this episode a little bit differently, given us a little something more unexpected, to probably say that like somebody was to try and go on and manipulate the situation, and it almost perfectly worked out, as if it was kind of some Scooby-Doo scenario. It's like, well, I would have gotten away with it if people weren't really going on and legitimately paying attention. But no, like, it kind of goes the route that like it should have, or it just easily goes into instead, because we have a person with a grudge. His family member, or his or her family members, were to get killed off, and so they end up having to give this person like their own story. So with that said, I've talked about this long enough. Let's just go into spoilers about these episodes. Let me know in the comments below, besides my huge, big, massive, fat rant that I just gave right now. Let me know how you feel about the episodes, how you felt about me pronouncing anything, because at the end of the day, I'm going to continue to just say stuff that I might not guarantee to know the pronunciation of. But it's fun to say anyways, right? So let's go on into that double 5-time territory. Let's just go into spoilers. Let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time, it's about the time you spoil these episodes. I've already gotten like the little stories out of the way, and that's good, so I can go on and do other things. So fantastic, right? So in the beginning of episode 5, we have Paul, the music director, that is to be among a number of students. And so this music director is to be looking around and just be like, well, like, we're going to be here all night. This is going to have to sound perfect. And because, of course, they are to also be a man down, because it seems that there is to be a group of these students that all wanted this one DJ to get kicked out of their group. I believe his name is to actually be Roddy. So we have Roddy, who goes on, gets kicked out of this group, and so after the long practice, we have this teacher who leaves for the night and is to all of a sudden have a number of these rat cages that are right by his car, that are all to have these rats trying to get in to his vehicle, to gnaw on him, to bite on him, to probably just be like, hey, we're here. It's great, right? So all of a sudden Paul is to be consumed by these rats, chewed up, and probably the most vicious thing about this episode, you'd probably look away during this time because you'd be like, "Eh, hey," because that could be you looking in the screen, going like, that looks gross." So we then the next day have Nick and Hank who are looking into this case, and it kind of comes down to the coroner that is to slice into these rats and dissect them and realize that there's certain fibers and certain things that are to make a connection further into the case than we anticipated. But both Nick and Hank go on to just open this car and all these rats just start coming out of it. And they're like, oh my God. And so Nick ends up noticing, as well as Hank, a number of rat cages. And they're like, well, hey, where did all these come from? We have to figure this out. So that goes on to connect both Nick and Hank to this rat exterminator, who, of course, is to be Ephraim Geiger, who may have been disgruntled because of his son getting ejected from this this special practice class that Paul was to be connected to. So they went on and they looked into Ephraim as well as his son, and they noticed that they found like a number of these same cages. And so when they interrogated both the father and the son, come to find out there was nothing that they could really tie them to, because Ephraim was to go on and file a report saying that his cages were stolen a number of days ago, and not quite sure why they kept all these rat cages with rats inside of them. But come to find out, we have Roddy anyways, who just likes all these rats. He just likes having them around. And plus also, he likes to go there and play his violin and play to them, I guess, to soothe the savage beasts that like to just gnaw on people for some goofy reason. So we come to find out that also Roddy is to be going to this club late at night and to be this DJ Wretched Cat, because it's kind of funny because he is actually a rat Vesson. His Vesson is to actually be a Reinigen. Reinigen! That actually sounds like a superhero's name. Like, The Adventures of Reinigen. You would probably make it sound more aggressively, like Reinigen, not him. I have defeated him before, but now here he is, Reinigen. That was so stupid. Anyways, but I went with it. So we have Roddy, who is to be this DJ, and that has nothing to really do with the whole crux of the thing. But so Roddy, come to find out, is to have this like Romeo and Juliet connection, because we, of course, have Sarah that is kind of in between guys right now. She really likes Roddy, but then she also is to be connected to a guy, I believe his name is Carter. So Sarah was to be forced with the rest of this group to do a thing to try to get Roddy kicked out of this class because of the whole love triangle thing. And so Roddy, of course, after the interrogation, was to go on and see Sarah and was to try and kiss her, and was to like be the guy that's like, yeah, I know you'd rather be with me instead of this other guy, and we all of a sudden have Sarah's mother, who of course is to be played by Judith Hoag, who a lot of people, or Hoag, I'm butchering that, I know. Uh, a lot of people will probably know her as April O'Neil from the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. Um, but I know she's gone on and played a number of things. I've seen her in a number of different shows, and it's always great to be like, yeah, she's in this. Great. She ends up playing Miss. Excuse me. She ends up playing Miss Jessup in this episode, and she, of course, is to be like, hey, like, Ronnie, you get out of here. Like, if I see you one more time, I'm gonna call the cops. Because me and my husband don't accept this like relationship between the two of you because you're not good enough for her, yada yada yada. So even though Roddy ends up becoming this famous DJ and he's still not good enough for your daughter, that sounds really smart. So Sarah ends up getting pulled from her possible lover, and we of course have Carter, who is to arrive at this house realizing that Roddy is to try and get with Sarah again, and Carter's just like, yeah, like, you're never gonna get with this girl, like, her parents aren't gonna accept you, too bad, right? And so Roddy is so tempted to just hurt this guy, and Carter's like, bring it on, like, I will sue you for what money your parents don't have. And so when Carter rolls up the window, that's when Roddy just kind of takes this swipe. Doesn't break the glass or anything, but it's just like this, So Roddy gets very upset with anger and rage and any other upset word we can kind of toss in here. Enragement? That's not a word. I just threw it out there. Enragement is not a word, just so you know. Anyways, because learning is fun. So Roddy is just stewing even more so, just getting more and more upset to where we have at some point where Roddy is to start to put the pieces together of what really happened to Paul Lawson and how it seems that Roddy and his father are getting blamed for this. We had Roddy who like couldn't have been booked for anything, but like his father wasn't exactly the same case. Since it was his like cages at the scene, they were like probably trying to think of like, well, like we can probably hold Ephraim for another day, but like we can't really charge him with anything either. So Nick and Hank go on to dice, like go on to the mortician or the coroner, Dr. Harper, that reveals within the rats that there seems to be this little bit of blanket and this little other like thing of food also in the digestive system of this rat. And so they're like, well, like, we're gonna go on and go into Ephraim and Roddy's place to see if there's any connection to what these rats had, and there wasn't, of course, anything like that. So Nick and Hank start to look into other students, and the obvious ones would be like the ones that Paul had worked with, because maybe they had a grudge on this teacher. So come to find out, Nick and Hank were to go on and find that there also had to be like a certain vehicle to go on and tie to this case. There was like certain like car marks or something like that was to lead to certain kinds of vehicles or certain wheel tracks or whatever. So they come to find out that it was some like specific vehicle, and that limited them to getting like a certain dozen, and all of them had to be connected to that school. And oddly enough, it ended up being that Carter's father's vehicle was somehow tied to this crime, possibly. So Nick and Hank go on to Carter's father's home, I believe. I think it's Carter's father, and they end up looking in the back of this guy's car to find this certain blanket and this certain kind of leftover food in there. So they're like, aha, like it must be this vehicle that was used in this crime. So now we're gonna have to take this vehicle and then hopefully at that point turn around and find out who is going to be the one that comes clean and is to confess that they did this crime. So, come to find out, we have Roddy, who is to go on and seek revenge on his students. And so Roddy is to put out there to certain people that DJ Wretched Cat is to go on and do this certain special performance. And so we end up getting one of the students turning to like Sarah and Carter and Marvin and everyone, and going on and saying like, yeah, like this is gonna be great. Like there's a performance of DJ Wretched Cat coming out tonight. Let's all go to this location. It will be great. So they all decide to go to that location, all of these students together. And so we have Roddy that decides to take his rats with him to this performance. And so he makes his way to this certain area, and he is to like kind of play with his music and do the violin, and all this ends up getting motivated by Nick going on and telling Monroe that maybe he should go on and talk to Roddy and like Vesson to Vesson try to like get this guy to go in the right direction. So Monroe starts to tell Roddy, it's like, well, hey man, like I don't know how it could be different between a Blutbot and a Reinigen, but like, hey man, like you have like a lot of potential here. You have a gift, even way better than Monroe, I guess, because Monroe is to also play really well on the cello, because I know woodwind instruments, I guess, maybe. And so we have Monroe telling Roddy that, hey, like, get your life together, like, you have some real potential, so you should go on and use that potential. So then Roddy turns around and is to go on and do what he is to do, regardless of what Monroe says. So Monroe is to try, or Roddy is to try to go on and scare these kids into confessing that they did what they did. To go on and have Roddy mention, it's like, yeah, you killed this teacher. You killed Mr. Lawson. Like, you did it, didn't you? And then he unleashes all the rats on all the kids. Come to find out, we have Nick and Hank, who ends up breaking into, or ends up making their way into one of the students' rooms to find they left their phone there, and they're going to this location, and they're like, aha, let's get to this location. Coming to find out that they were all going to this sleepover or something like that, but they lied to their parents, and instead they're going to this performance. So we have Nick, we have Hank make it to this place, stop the rats before they get too vicious on a number of these kids. And so they all turn around and they confess that they did this crime, that they killed this teacher. and they all wanted to point it on Roddy, but like now they realize that Roddy is to realize what they were trying to do, and so they scared he scared them into coming clean. So they were to go on and tell the truth. So people like Sarah and all these other kids end up getting arrested, and we then have Hank wanting to like fill out this report about like how many rats there were there 1,000, were there 1,000,000 rats, and Nick is like, I don't think that they would buy like 1,000,000 rats. You could probably say like 1,000, and that would rationally make more sense. But Nick also asks Hank, it's like, why are you even filling out this report? And Hank is like, well, it's the right thing to do. And Nick is like, I don't think we should fill this out. Like, I think that these kids just coming clean, like, just solves our case. Like, I don't think we need to go on and do anything more than that. Hank's like, are you sure? And Nick's like, yeah, I think that's fine. Like, we don't have to tie in the whole Roddy going after these kids. Like, no, like, good enough. So they got enough bad guys for one day. Why go after Roddy? So that kind of wraps up episode 5 in a nutshell. There might have been other scenes besides that, but that's the only thing that I really want to focus on for episode 5. So to kind of get this rolling. So episode 6. Episode 6, we of course have a Bauerschwein. Fine. Anyways, so come to find out at the beginning of this episode, we have a guy named Hap Lasser. I've seen Brad William Henke in a number of different shows. Heaven forbid I get his name right, but I've seen Brad in a number of different things. I've seen him in like Justified. I've seen him in Dexter. It's cool to continue to see Brad. There's a lot of times where he ends up playing like the lovable goof character. There's sometimes where he ends up playing this like really aggressive guy, where he plays the bad guy. I think I ended up seeing him in oh god, what was that one movie? It would take too long to remember. It was some movie where he was Split. He was in Split also. That was plays a bad guy in there too also. Anyways, pushing on. So we have Hap here. Hap is to somehow be in his place and is to, for some reason, to leave his place, and all of a sudden his house blows up behind him. And very unusual, but that's what happens in this episode. So Nick and Hank are filing this report with Hap where it seems that somebody is to want him dead. Hap, who I guess had smoked a big fatty before going outside, meaning weed. We had Hap, who was kind of very disoriented and very confused about what had all happened. So Hap just goes on and is to go on and tell Nick and Hank all the people that he owes money to, and that could possibly be the reason that somebody might be after him, but he's not sure. So come to find out, Hap is to make a phone call, and that phone call ends up happening to be tied to Monroe, because both Hap and Monroe are to be old friends, and it seems that Hap had no one else to really turn to. So Monroe ends up showing himself here, and so Nick is kind of confused why Monroe's here. It's like, well, hey, like, I didn't know we had something going on today, and Monroe is like, oh no, I'm just like friends with Hap. And Hap is asking Monroe, it's like, well, hey, like, did you do anything illegal in the past and that's how you know this guy? And Nick is like, no, like, just shush about all this. Just come on, like, we don't want people to know that we're Vessons and Grimms. But at some point, we have Monroe like tell Hap it's like, hey, this guy's a Grimm, but he's okay. And at some point, we have to go on and exchange that to other Vesson that end up showing up in this episode. So Monroe takes Hap to his place where Monroe is to kind of be a little bit like Sheldon, tell him it's like, well, hey, I usually take a shower at this time, I go on Pilates at this time, I do this and this time, and Hap is just like, well, okay, like, can I get some underwear? So we have Nick and we have Hank, who is to go to Lieutenant Peter Orson because this is a fire crime of sorts, a gas leak of sorts. So they end up going to this guy and filling out the report, and it seems that Nick is to kind of be uneasy about this guy for reasons, and we'll talk about that later. So we go on to find out that Happy, his life is to be at risk, and so he's staying at Monroe's. So we have at one point where Nick is to go on and investigate this one other place, and come to find out there is a picture present within this place. And while Nick is doing some investigation, we all of a sudden have this Vesson that clocks into Nick, smacking him down, while this Vesson is just ramming his way through this place, and then we don't see who it actually is. So, come to find out, when we meet up with Angelina, who is to also be a Blutbad, she is to think that Nick may go on and be this killer, this assassin, and grabs Nick, tosses him out of this car, and starts beating him up. And that, of course, is when Angelina realizes that Nick is a Grimm, and that Nick realizes that this girl is a Vesson. So we have Hap and we have Monroe, who run outside because they hear the commotion, and we have Monroe who has to explain to Angelina who Nick is, and he's okay. Even though Angelina doesn't really believe it, because she assumes that if this is a Grimm, they're all dead. And she also assumes that this must be who is killing people, which it's not. So we have at some point where Nick is to leave for the night, and so Monroe and Angelina are to want to relive their youth, and it's been a while since Monroe is to have gone on and been out in the wild. So while Hap is sleeping on the couch, we have Angelina and we have Monroe, because they have a history together. They run off into the woods to explore and to consume a rabbit and so on and so forth, and kind of relive their glory days. So that also makes them relive passionate moments between the two of them within this forest. And so they end up waking bloody together, and come to find out when they make their way back, we realize that Hap is dead. Hap is to answer this door, assuming that it's some kind of food or ribs or something. and come to find out instead, it's to be his killer, his assassin. And this guy ends up having a silencer and popping Hap a couple of times, killing him. We then go on and have them have the police swarm the place, realizing that Hap is dead. Angelina and both Monroe end up realizing now that Hap is dead, and Hank is to mention that Angela has blood on her tank top. So it's like, okay, we should probably call these people in for questioning because they don't have a alibi here. So we have Hank, who is to interrogate Angelina to have her forcibly take off her tank top to assess what that blood is. And now Angelina is walking around shirtless and in all of her glory, of course. Waist up. So Monroe and Angelina are to convince the cops that they had nothing to do with Hap's death. And so we have Angelina, who is very upset with Monroe as she is now walking off with this jacket, and like she hates who Monroe has become, but also now that Hap's dead, like it's a whole thing. So come to find out, Angelina is to get a whiff of who this assassin could be, because of course she could sense this person. And so this leads Angelina to where Nick was investigating prior and was to get the scent of this guy. And so it seems that Angelina is getting a pretty good assessment of who this guy really is. And also it seems so does Nick. So Nick is going on and meeting again with Lieutenant Peter Orson, and is to realize that this guy is to file an incorrect report. And so Nick looks into it and is to start making accusations and is to say, it's like, well, hey, we're going to go elsewhere to deliver the correct report. And because, like, we think that something's up here with you. So come to find out, Lieutenant Peter Orson is to be a Bauerschwein, and we have at a point where Nick is to come in on the lieutenant, and he is in this like mud bath or this kind of slop bath, and the lieutenant ends up kind of popping up from this bath. Nick is like, oh my god. And Lieutenant's like, oh no, like this is what I normally do. This is how I normally bathe. And he's just like, okay, all right. So we have Nick again, who is to be asking this lieutenant questions, realizing that now he's a Bauerschwein, and like asking about the history of both Bauerschwein and Blutbots. And Nick is to find out that this lieutenant has had some family deaths in the past, and that could give him all the reason to go after these these Blutbots. So come to find out, this guy does have a grudge, and come to find out that it'll all come into a conclusion when we finally have Angelina finding out where Lieutenant Peter Orson lives, and they are to both start to fight between the two of them. We have Nick, who is to be holding a gun on both of them, just trying to see how this is to all end up. And so Nick, by the end of this, is to get his man, and by the end of the episode, we go on, we have Nick, who is to give Monroe this old photo of his friends to kind of remind him of his old days. To say, it's like, well, hey, like don't have this all, like, be behind you. It's like kind of keep this as a memory of your old friends and your blue bod connection and whatever. I don't know if it was Nick or if it was Angelina, but still, like a photo was given to Monroe regardless. So, so with that said, yeah, I think that is to all of what is to really be said for these episodes. I didn't get into the clear consensus of how that last episode ended, but good enough for me. At the end of the day, let me know in the comments below how you felt about whatever these episodes, the whole season in general. I really liked episode 5. Kind of felt like kind of mixed about the following episode. I like that we got some more backstory of Monroe, but like I didn't really like how like we went about things. Um, it just felt like a lot of episode 6 was just stretching for time. Whereas episode 5 felt really well paced. Um, there's really interesting story going on there. Where episode 6 just mostly just stretched to finish it up to come up with some like killer that is randomly killing blue bots, and then like come up with reasons for this guy to go on and go after these characters because there is a huff and puff and blow down backstory to it all of this grudge match between these two Vestin for the longest time, and just to figure out a way to stretch an episode. But anyways, I'm not going to stretch this any longer. Let's get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody. One thing that we did have. Juliet. Juliet was to be doctoring up some dog, some neighborhood dog. And come to find out she was to check on Nick from his head wound from the time that he got bopped and fell down on the ground. That's the one thing I wanted to cover. Also, there was to be the moment between both Monroe and the lieutenant where he holds a gun on him, and Monroe is to go on and be like, do we really need to do this? Like, do we? And the lieutenant is just be like, well, hey, are you going to get to me before I get to you? Like, can you attack me before I fire this gun? Are you quick enough? Kind of a thing. And the lieutenant mentions is like there's some like real firepower in this shotgun, and like this guy is gonna go on and shoot him before Monroe is going to sink his teeth in to this guy. We also had a moment where Angelina is to be thumbing around the lieutenant's office trying to send a message to this guy, and that's where the lieutenant turns around and goes to Monroe's place to send a message also. And so by the end of this, I think Angelina does end up giving that photo to Monroe as she is to disappear. And I think later on she does resurface, but people can correct me if I'm wrong. But just a photo of the past. So I'm trying to think if there's anything really left to cover, because I feel like there was like something that I misplaced or forgot about towards the end of this. No, I think everything else feels good enough. Feels covered. I'm just gonna get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody. Hopefully there's nothing else that I have left to say, so I'm gonna get out of here. Bye.